Welcome, Hawkeye fans, to another episode of Chat from the Old Cap. My name is Tony Hakes. I'm the Director of Regional Programs here at the University of Iowa Center for Advancement. That slide that you were all seeing as you were coming in was just a snapshot of all the projects that our guest today, Cathy Parrott, has worked on over the last few years. We're very excited to have Cathy as our guest today. If you're not familiar with her work, she was initially a pre-dentistry major at the University of Iowa, and she's going to discuss her journey from Iowa City to the Big Apple, discuss her experience working on a 2021 major motion picture. Cathy is a Manchester, Iowa native and has worked on more than 45 productions across the globe and collaborated with Hugh Jackman and Emmy Award-winning costume designer Ellen Mirojnick. I think I said that right, for a 2017 blockbuster, The Greatest Showman. I was going to be singing The Greatest Showman when we started today, but I chose not to, so you're welcome to everybody out there. Cathy has also assisted on Broadway hits such as On Your Feet, the story of Emilio and Gloria Estefan, and Motown the musical, as well as an unreleased production about Princess Diana. Cathy, welcome. We're so happy to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, it's a real honor to have you on our program. And you can see just from that opening slide and from what I just read, you have really had an incredible resume and career already in your life, which is very cool. Thank you for representing Iowa. But we know you're from Manchester, which is just up the road, an hour or so from here. But tell us a little bit more about yourself, maybe how you ended up at Iowa.
Well, like you said, I went to Iowa as a pre-dentistry major. How I landed there is I worked for a dentist here in Manchester my last year and a half before I graduated from high school. Being a dentist, that's what I was going to be when I left here. So the University of Iowa seemed like the obvious choice for me at the time, having a fantastic dental program. But about a year and a half into the dentistry program, I realized all the chemistry and calculus classes were not not going to be the right path for me. It might have been the fact that one of them was at 7:30 in the morning, trudging around campus. It might have been, or it just was not going to be the way I wanted to spend the rest of my life. But funny enough, as an undergraduate, you had to meet with an academic advisor, every semester to set up your classes, moving forward. So she was like, all right, Cathy, we got to take a new approach right now, because you're a year and a half in and, we don't have a major at this point. So we've got to get those grades up. So, what are you interested in? What do you like to do? I was 19 years old and, I couldn't tell her, going downtown with my friends or, listening to music. But I did. I told her, I really like listening. I listen to a lot of music, and I'm really interested in clothing. And she's like, well, all right, we're gonna do something new this semester. So she put me in 2 music classes. So in the music department, it was an elements of music class where I learned how to, read and write music. Luckily, I already knew how to read it, but learned how to write it. And a music appreciation, music history class. So learning, going back in history. And learning about a lot of the composers, all the way up through modern time. But in addition to those 2 classes, she was like, well, if you're really into fashion or if that's really what you are into doing, Iowa doesn't have a fashion program here. You'd have to go to Iowa State. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not a cyclone. So that's out of, that's out of the question. She's like, all right, well, she's like, well, there is somebody in the theater department that, that tells the actors what to wear. And she's like, so let me take a look and see what classes we could slot you in over at the theater department if that sounds like something you'd be interested in. And I was like, sure, why not? I was definitely open to options at that moment. Coming in as a pre-dentistry major, I'd never done theater before, so I thought, why not give it a shot? So she enrolled me in an elements of design class, and where you're learning the fundamentals of design, line, shape, color, the color wheel, and balance and such, and a theater tech class, theater crafts. So you were learning how to paint in the scene shop and, putting scenery together and hanging lights and sewing on a button, which, most college students actually have never done, believe it or not. And so it was that semester when I landed in those 2 theater classes, especially the elements of design class, where we were reading a script for the first time and we had to analyze it from a design standpoint. I researched the costumes and we had to draw them for the first time. And it was in that particular class and that particular project that that I was hooked, and has essentially sealed sealed the deal for the rest of to date. So I have a fly.
I'm not sure if that was on my screen or your screen.
No, it's mine. It's a fly. And so the professor of that hall to Professor Arthur's office, was the head of the costume program in the theater department, and I sat in her office at the end of that semester and said, "Take me, please. What do you know? What do you have to offer? What can I learn from you? What do I need to do next? Because this project and this path seems really interesting and exciting to me. And I just got some A's in a class, and I want to continue this. So how do I keep moving forward?" So at that point, I latched on, and I made her my mentor. She liked it or not, but at that point, I was very fortunate. So that's how I ended up getting into theater. Although I went to college to be a dentist.
Very cool. When you mentioned calculus and 7:30 a.m. winter classes, I think we all kind of cringed a little bit. But it's also a great, sort of testament to your advisor. You went to them and they did exactly what they were supposed to do. And I think a lot of us, on these calls are alumni here, and to go, we've all been through that, where you go to your advisor and they literally help you. And we're so glad that this advisor saw that in you, and you were able to let them know that that's what you wanted to do, because you've obviously gone on to great things. You talked about a professor that inspired you. Is there a particular memory that you had at Iowa that you're very fond of, or that you've carried with you through your career?
I guess not necessarily, pinpointing a true one memory, but I have to say probably the most impressionable memories that I have is I was a student employee at the University of Iowa Foundation, or that's what it was called at the time. And it was my time there and working in that environment. It was the fundraiser for the whole university. It was all of the other students that I met and worked there. Several of them are still my good friends to date, living around the country, a bunch in Chicago. And it's those memories and those people that I met there that have continued with me throughout my life. But also working in that environment, coming from a small town, 3 stoplight town, Manchester, working at the foundation, I was surrounded by a lot of women, and seeing the great positions and the managerial positions that they were in, and the type of roles that they took on there. I thought, and meeting them and learning from them and observing them, just being surrounded by a lot of women in those positions at the foundation was something that I wanted to aspire to, and I was so fortunate to have met a lot of them and still continue to have a lot of them in my life as role models. So it started in Iowa, and luckily they've continued since.
Well, that's really great to hear. And as you know, the foundation merged with the Alumni Association to become the UICA, which is who we work for, a lot of us on this call. And that is still present today. That culture and that attitude is still present today. So I'm very glad to hear that is something you still carry with you. That's really great to hear. How do you think Iowa prepared you for your career?
I've got to say, probably dedication and like perseverance, working in the theater. Once you commit to a project, seeing it from beginning, middle to end, and in the endurance of the long hours and the hard work it is, and especially in academia where you're doing it on a very low budget and trying to be extremely creative, but you're just learning how to adapt and what that even means. I've got to say that the dedication and perseverance. Also the exposure. I was, Lois, my mentor, led a summer study abroad in London, and it was as a performance study in which her class focused on multicultural and interculturalism in theater. So it was, I've got to say, the exposure and opening up a lot of doors is something that probably Iowa prepared me most for. So.
Very cool. Well, as you know what's going on in the world right now, Iowa is being challenged even more to, prove our dedication and continue to, give our students everything we need. So that's really great to hear. So you mentioned, how that time at Iowa prepared you for your career. Let's talk a little bit more about your career. We've had several guests on this program that have some Hollywood ties, and we know that that's a really hard thing to get into, Hollywood and Broadway. Can you tell us a little bit how you were able to break into those fields?
Yeah. So after undergrad, I went to the University of Georgia for my master's degree. So I held a master's in fine arts in theatrical design from Georgia. So after 4.5 years at Iowa, I then went and did 3 years in Georgia, where I did a semester-long internship at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. So following that final semester and after writing my thesis, I left my apartment in Athens, Georgia, with everything in it, and drove up to the Bloomington Normal, Illinois State, to the Illinois Shakespeare Festival. I was assisting costume designer Lauren Lowell on a Shakespearean piece that summer. And I was only going to be there for maybe two months, the first 2 months, or a month and a half of the summer, right after graduation, and just drove up, in my car. Anything I needed for the summer was all I had with me. And the end of June, I got a call from my best friend in New York, who had been one of my best friends from graduate school, and she had just been hired on a Broadway bound production. And Broadway bound means that they're going to be putting up and starting the new production in another city, like Chicago or Seattle, or we put it up on its feet out of town first, and we work out all the kinks. We get an audience, we take feedback, we work on it again, and then you bring it into Broadway. So that's where they were in the stage. It was a brand new Broadway bound production, and they needed another production assistant, or shopper we called them at the time, but it was the lowest role on the totem pole. So everybody on the team got to tell you what to do, and you ran around like crazy. So she called me. I was at work at the Illinois Shakespeare Festival, and she said, an associate designer from this Broadway studio is going to call you, and we're looking for another assistant. And I told her that you're going to be in New York and you're going to be perfect for the job. So I'd only been to New York like once in my life before that, for like 2 days. I didn't know where anything was in New York. And sure enough, within 10 minutes, I got a phone call from the Broadway studio, and she was like, "So I hear you're moving to New York." Yes, yeah, I'm going to be moving there. I just planned on moving sometime at the end of the summer. I was going to go back and pack up my apartment, go see my family after the Illinois Shakespeare job. But she goes, "Well, this is the end of June," and she goes, "Well, when can you get here?" I was like, "When can I?" "Well, my show opens on July 3rd. She thought about it a second. She said, "Okay, you're going to be on a plane on the 4th, and you're going to start work on the 5th. So that was 10 days notice. So I had 10 days notice to, instead of just kind of, taking the summer at leisure after my job, packing up the apartment, moving to New York, and then just figuring it out. It was figured out for me. So I called up my parents, who were living in Manchester at the time, and I said, "Can you meet me at the Moline, Illinois airport? Because I need to give you my car because I'm moving to New York in 10 days. So I flew to New York with a suitcase, and I showed up on my best friend's doorstep and lived on her couch for the first month, and started work the very next day, the 5th of July. So a week ago, or I guess 2 weeks ago now, I've been in New York now for 15 years. And that was how I jumped and first into New York.
Wow, you make it sound easy. I'm sure you put in a lot more effort than that. So that's great to be, just pretty fresh out of things and be able to jump in is fantastic. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You've got quite a resume of shows that you've worked on. Is there one in particular that stands out for you as one of your favorites?
Oh, the favorite game is so hard. I got to say, one of the ones I'm probably the most proud of is Motown, the musical. That particular production meant a lot to me, and the designer I was working with, we'd been collaborating for several years at that point, and working with Barry Gordy, the founder of Motown, as our lead producer and the writer. And my parents ended up coming to opening night, so they were able to see, Smokey Robinson, Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder. They were all there that night for opening night. But Motown, it was the largest design team I'd ever put together at that point. Production up, but I've got to say Motown is probably the most memorable. It was probably one of the hardest, but it's something that I'm extremely proud of to have been a part of.
Very cool. You broke up just a little bit there, but it sounded like some really big names that you've worked with. Stevie Wonder, that's...
well, they showed up for opening, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Kind of along those same vein, is there a favorite actor or actress that you've been able to work with over the years?
I gotta say probably Hugh Jackman was very nice. Was very nice. He's just one of those really fantastic, I hate to say it, the idea, movie stars. When he walks into a room, the energy just is amped, and the excitement around him, and he's just so genuinely nice and such a gentleman. So to be able to work with him and see how he interacts and works with everyone else around him was inspiring. So I'd have to say Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, that's I never knew that Wolverine could sing, and apparently he can sing quite well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, he's been musical theater guy. So long before Wolverine, he was singing in Oklahoma. So.
Oh, really? That's really cool, and I kind of get that impression about him, that he's that pretty genuine type of guy. So that's great to hear it from you. So with this sort of pandemic, how is the industry doing now? What have you had to do to change?
Oh, well, a big part of our industry is on hold right now. So Broadway is shut down through the year at least. So it is on hold until at least January 3rd at the moment. So we'll see what happens after the new year. Just a few days ago, New York City did declare that film and television can come back. So that industry is trying to pick up in New York City right now, and see how far they're able to get. But Broadway is where it's a pretty difficult spot for all the Broadway artists to be in. So so a lot of the costume shops, so the businesses that make our clothing, that make the gloves, all the hats, the millinery, all the props. Those are the people that I work with on every single show. So as part of the design team, I can do the research, I can do the paperwork, we can draw the sketches, but without the costume shops to actually make the garments for us, from the fabrics that we supply, then our job is obsolete if we have nobody to create it for us. So right now, the costume shops are forming the Costume Industry Coalition. And so they've been trying to work with the government to fight for support to get us through this year. So the funding for the arts has really never been so crucial. So it's definitely a time to be saving the arts.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes it's easy to forget, the ripple effect of how many people, this affects. So it sounds like they're, fighting to get back to a little bit of normalcy and some help. But yeah, we appreciate you sticking with it and representing Iowa well, even in these challenging times. So I know you've got some slides about some projects you've worked on and some shows you've been a part of. So I'm going to make sure that you can share, and I'll turn it over to you, and you can just kind of talk us through what we're seeing on the screen here.
Just put together a few different slides so you can see the Iowa girl in work in New York City. Just kind of working our way clockwise on the upper left. It's Michael Wilkinson, the costume designer of Noah, which was the first major motion picture that I worked on. And that's the arc that they built behind us. And then working our way to the right then, that's me and another assistant in a fitting for After Midnight, which was a Broadway musical. And next is the marquee for Tootsie at the Marquee Theater. And in the photo with me, I'm in the center, And then in that photo is actually all University of Iowa graduates from the theater MFA department. So there were, on Tootsie the Musical, there were 4 University of Iowa graduates that worked on the costumes. So 3 of them there had worked and to visit spring break. But Lindsay, who you see there all the way on the right-hand side of the grouping, she came to New York on her final spring break in graduate school to work with us for the week. So the dedication behind that, because she had interned the summer before when we did our out-of-town tryout in Chicago. So to see the whole project from out-of-town tryout to Chicago, and then to moving it to Broadway, instead of running off and going to the beach for spring break, she came and worked with us for that week while we were in technical rehearsals. So, so like I said, one thing I learned at Iowa was dedication. I was extremely proud of her so that she was able to see that project all the way through. So, and next to her is Becky Bodertha, who's another graduate from Iowa, who we worked on at least 12 productions together. So I've been very thankful for her in my career. And then all the way on the right, we have the Greatest Showman poster with Lois Arthur, my mentor, who is now definitely a friend, who I'm so grateful for to be in my life, and my life would definitely not be the same without her. So to be able to take her to the screening of the Greatest Showman in Iowa, right when it was released into the theaters a few years ago, was definitely one of the highlights of my life. I was extremely proud. So thank you, Lois, for that. And then on the bottom row, it's out in front of the poster of the AMC for Noah. Like I said, it was my first major motion picture. And then working our way to the right again is I'm in one of the costume shops in New York City that makes a lot of our leading ladies' dresses, Tricorn, who I've been working with my entire career. Cathy Marshall, the owner there. So a lot of what you do, or what you think we do, is all very glamorous shopping. Well, along with glamorous shopping becomes a lot of returns. So in those boxes would be all the online shopping and returns. And then just a glamour shot from Statue of Liberty and going into a stage door, actually in Chicago. So for our out-of-town tryout, I think, or it might have actually been our national tour of Tootsie, or not Tootsie, but of Motown. On our next slide, I just put together a few of our opening nights. All the hard work that we lead up to, each of the contracts can, at this point, a lot of my contracts are, can be about 6 months of work, 6 days a week. And really you're doing some work at home on your 7th day. Everything I do it's contract based. So it's, everything has a very short, deadline. So the intensity can often be very high. But here in the pictures, up in the upper left corner, we have, Gene Wilder, another Iowa attendee from the theater department, with Mel Brooks. That was from the opening night of Young Frankenstein. So he surprised the audience, and came on stage at the end for the bows, which received flowers. So that was very, very exciting for the crowd, especially me, another Iowa grad. So to see Gene Wilder there, that was definitely a highlight. Just from opening nights of On Your Feet, from Tootsie, another, and over on the right, a few more Iowa grads, Haley Ryan and Becky Bodertha. And down on the bottom row, we are opening nights for Porgy and Bess, Motown the Musical, and all the way in the lower right is a photo from when I got to go to the Tony Awards. I had not even been in New York City a year yet, and my second job was one of the assistants, non-union shopper on The Drowsy Chaperone. And that year, Greg Barnes won the Tony for best design, for best costume design. So the fact that the design team just surrounding him there were able to support him that night, that was definitely a pinch me moment, where I had, an Iowa girl sitting at the Tony Awards, not even 1 year in New York City. And I was like, well, I don't know where I can go from here, but that was definitely a big highlight. So these next 3 slides are kind of showcasing a particular costume or production. On this slide here, you can see the process that a designer will go through to create a costume. This was for Motown, the musical, for Diana Ross. Now, for this particular production, you know, all these characters were based on real people. So we had a lot of primary, secondary research to go to, you know, actual photos, and in some cases, some of the real garments that were at museums. Of a lot of that Emilio would then design for our musical. So a lot of designers, we subscribe to you can really only have one red dress, one showstopper red dress in a particular production, or at least for character. So for Diana Ross, this was her Act 2, where she has decided that she's leaving Motown and is branching out as a solo artist on her own. So the research was based on Diana Ross's actual dresses designed by Bob Mackie, custom beaded, and then you can see Emilio's sketches in the middle, and the notes and the signature, and those were done in 2012. And then we move over to a fitting picture. So we don't dive straight into the beaded fabric. We create a mock-up first. So we're able to make changes and see how the fabric will lay on the body and work with the actor, and see how they're comfortable, and make sure that they feel supported, that they can do what their actions, that they can do what they need to do on stage in the particular garment that we're working with. So if you look really, really closely, you can see me in the background of that photo in the mirror, taking the fitting photo. Working our way on the bottom row, we have the beater. So every single bead on that dress is hand beaded. Every single one is hand stitched. So that's what she's doing, is she has a panel of the dress on the board, and she's custom beading it. And what you can't really see is that Emilio is crawled underneath of the table there to see the beading from the underside. So he can see the beadwork from the backside. And then you can see a panel there on the dress form. So we could see, we move that into the fitting room. We put it under the spotlights. We have stage lights in the fitting room, so you're able to really get the distance and see what it's going to look like on stage. And then that's Emilio, the designer, holding a panel up on the actress, so they can see it in real, in person for the real first time. And then one of the drapers in the background who made the costume. And then all the way on the right, the final product. This one is actually from our London production, but it showcased the outer frock and the beaded dress that went with it. So that's kind of a beginning, middle, and end to how we create a costume. Like I said, this one we had a head start, and we had some really great, primary research from Diana Ross herself. So we took a leap from there. Next up, I was the lead assistant for A Christmas Story Live. So this is one of the productions. They've been Fox and NBC. They've been doing a lot of live productions the last few years. So this one was, we shot it out at the Warner Brothers backlot in Burbank, California, a few years ago. And the upper left pictures they're from the photo shoots. So in addition to clothing, all the actors for the production you're seeing, we also have to style and work on these promotional and marketing images. It could be 2 months ahead of time. So we're setting the look before we've even done the real fittings on the actors. So I'd been out in California for about maybe 2 or 3 days before this photo shoot was done. So we put it all together extremely, extremely fast. On the bottom, you'll see kind of the process shot of how we came up with the Lamp Girls dresses for the production number A Major Award. So if you remember from A Christmas Story, the movie, of course, the leg lamp, one of the most famous props in all of film history, we had a production number based on it. So we were challenged with creating a costume for a stage of showgirls. And so that was, as you can see there in the middle, the costume that we ended up coming up with based on a lot of the research and inspiration on the left-hand side. And then on the right is a picture of being on the back lot. So that's the stage that they built, and they actually built it in the middle of one of the back lot roads. So you think it's an inside, you think it's inside, but it's actually just outside, and everything was brought in. Because on the back lot, they are running from location to location and running around on golf carts and sprinting to the different locations, since it was also very very different at the time, is that this was A Christmas Story Live came out right before The Greatest Showman was released in theaters. So they teamed up, and The Greatest Showman did a live commercial during A Christmas Story Live. So they were on the same back lot, just right behind us. Ellen and Patrick, the designers of The Greatest Showman, were there. So I would literally run from one set. Once they got to commercial, I ran around the corner and was able to watch them film and shoot this live commercial for the Greatest Showman. So to have my two worlds converge on that back lot at that moment was definitely a very overwhelming and really amazing experience. So, the last movie that I did was In the Heights. That was a movie musical based on Lin-Manuel Miranda's Broadway musical from about 2008. And we filmed this last summer in New York City, up in the Heights of Manhattan. So, I cannot speak too very much about this one since it has not come out yet. So I pulled several images up from that are already online and that have been released in a few different publications for you to see here. So down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll actually see Lin there in the middle next to John Chu, the director. But as you can see by the number of people and the huge dance numbers, this was an extremely large project. That was very inspiring, and to be able to take my life in musical theater on the Broadway stage and allow that to transition to film and working with Mitchell Travers as the costume designer for In the Heights that was definitely one of the highlights of my career. So he's an extremely talented designer. Who I very much look forward to seeing what he's going to be creating in the future. So this is one project I'm very excited for you guys to see. It was supposed to be released last month, but unfortunately, as you know, we're not able to hang out in the theaters right now. So put it on your calendar for next summer so that we can all go to In the Heights in the movie theater together. So, back to this.
Excellent. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we were watching a lot of Hamilton around our house here as of late, so that's pretty cool that you get to work with him. We'll open it up to for a few questions, so you can actually send those to me directly through the chat. We've already had a few come in. So the first question I got right away was, how many beads were on Diana Ross's dress?
Oh gosh. There's probably an article with Swarovski that would list it. Oh, you stumped me. I can't tell you. I can't tell you because I'm sworn to secrecy or because I don't know.
Oh. Hey, that's okay. I imagine a lot. So here's a couple other questions. How many costumes do you make? So for example, the Diana Ross dress, do you make more than one? So you have backups. How many do you normally make per sort of star or character?
For each actor, there's usually just one.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so that particular dress is probably around $10,000 to make. It probably was a little less than, but it would be about that now, if not more. But on a Broadway production, they have understudies. So if you have the character Diana Ross, the actress playing her, she would have two people in the theater that cover her. So if she's out, the other two have their own dress to then go on in the role. So in theory, on a well-budgeted and produced Broadway production, I would have 3 of those red beaded dresses in the building. But there's one that fits each person. So There's now for like menswear, like a men's dress shirt, we have two, so we would do a rotation. But sometimes pants, like men's pants, if they're doing a lot of splits or they're doing a lot of knee slides, you know, to just design pretty clothes to stand on stage or walk down a runway, you know, like a true fashion show. Our clothes have to be made for a particular action that supports the actors and their dancing and their acting or whatever action they're going to be doing on stage. So for the most part, on a big, you know, an expensive dress like that, there would just be one in the building for each of the actors.
Wow, okay. A couple other questions here. At what point are you brought into the design process? Like, so Broadway says we want to do Motown, they do screenplays and music and whatever. When are you brought in and when do you leave?
I'm brought in at this point as an associate designer. I'm the first one to join the team behind the designer. So the designer hires me. I'm brought in pretty early, which would be, if we're going straight to Broadway, about 4 to 6 months. About 6 months, 5 to 6 months before we would open on Broadway. So I would be doing a lot of the script breakdowns, which means I'd read the script and analyze it, and then doing a lot of the charting in terms of who's in what scene and what do they need to do and what do the costumes need to do. And then from those charts, then I work directly with the designer and to find and locate all the research or inspiration that they need in order to get their designs approved by the director and producers and actors. And then from that, then we do the budgets. So we're not able to move forward on the job until the budget is approved, because even though we're in the arts, it still comes down to money. So I do the budgeting as well. So on a Broadway production, I've had anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million for the costumes to budget. So in addition to doing all the design work, I manage the budget and I manage the design team and do all the hiring on the design team as well.
Amazing. We have a really great question here. Any advice for a young, 11 years old, future Hawkeye that wants to be involved in theater?
Oh, yes. Well, get involved in the town that you're currently in, or if you're close to Cedar Rapids, or any other of the bigger towns that have more artistic outlets than where you live. Just start. There's so many YouTube videos. There's private vocal coaches or dance instructors, or there's a whole entire library probably in your town that you can start learning about the people that did it before you. So it's learning as much as you possibly can at whatever stage you're in, and just starting to you can find everything on the internet now, right? So if you can Google just famous costume designers or costume designers in New York, or anything that or where where specifically you want to be looking at. You can just start Googling it and finding the people that are actually doing it and trying to reach out to them directly. So, as an Iowa grad, I've been able to, connect with Iowa alumni and or graduate students, undergraduate students, but also that network has branched out, and I've been giving talks at Stanford and Carnegie Mellon and Illinois State and several other universities. And so now with each talk and each classroom I enter, either virtually or in person, then they now know a costume designer in the industry, and with me comes my whole network. So if and when they move to New York or another LA, they then have one resource that I can, if I'm not hiring, perhaps some of my other colleagues are. So that's how most of us have gotten a lot of our jobs is by knowing somebody else. So, but that's something that we're trying to work on in our industry too, is trying to work on different ways in which we're pooling and hiring.
That's a great answer and advice. And just along those lines, what do you look for when you're putting together a design team? What kind of qualifications are you looking for, other than being a Hawkeye?
Other than being a Hawkeye, that's
in
really
addition to being a Hawkeye.
I've hired more Hawkeyes in the last few years than.
That's great.
So yeah, so number one, be a Hawkeye, and I look for good references. You know, I look at the people that they've worked with in the past, and I call them and I want to know what it's like to be in the room with them. You know, particularly look for, you know, the MFA from, you know, Yale or, you know, NYU, you know, the top theater, you know, universities in the country. I want someone who has worked very hard, who has, you know, perhaps put themselves through school, who has perhaps, you know, that has paved their way and is very interested in what they're doing, that wants to be in the room with us, that is legitimately very excited and inspired by the work that we want to keep evolving and growing with each production. So the industry has very much changed even over the last I started. And, you know, as an associate, you know, with each production I've learned along the way, and I want to keep growing, you know, as a leader and as a boss and as a designer. So it's really looking for those things that really aren't taught in school. I'm looking for good people to be around. I spend my time at work. I'm at work more than I'm at home. So I really want to be surrounded by people that I enjoy their energy and put a lot of good out in the world, and we're in it together. So creating some really great art in the end. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, I think you just described every Iowan I've ever met, so got a good pool to draw from. I think we're about at time here, but just one more quick question, because I think this is really interesting. At the end of the show, at the end of the run, what happens to all these costumes?
Broadway productions costumes, they will all they'll all go into big wardrobe boxes, and hopefully we'll be sending them out on a national tour. So if you didn't get a chance to see them on Broadway before the show closed, hopefully you could see it in the city near you. So the majority of them will go in a box, and they will go to, they'll either go into storage and the producers will send it out on a national tour, or there's a few different companies around the country that buy these Broadway shows as packages, and then they'll go to their warehouse, and then those touring companies will then send out the production. So that's where the majority of the costumes go.
Well, very cool. Well, we are just about at time here. I do want to let everyone know that we have another chat from the Old Cap coming up next week, and I'm going to put that registration link in the chat right now. That's going to be a journalism panel, so this will be the first time we'll have more than one guest on. We have 3 that'll be joining us, and they are former network television senior correspondent John Cochran, who is a graduate of the university, investigative reporter Brian Ross, also a graduate of the university, and Cedar Rapids Gazette reporter Marissa Payne, who just graduated, and she worked at the BI for a number of years. So they're going to be talking about all the stuff that is happening in the world of journalism right now. So Cathy, we hope you can join us and everybody else on the call at that today, because that's going to be just as great as this, we hope. So this was really fantastic. You know, you've given us all some information that we probably never would have access to, and ideas and thoughts and advice that you can't get just off the internet. So thank you so much for doing this. We're very proud of you. We wish you nothing but the absolute best as you recover from the pandemic, and all the projects that you have going on are really fantastic. So thank you very much for being part of our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great being here.
Excellent. Well, this will be recorded and posted on YouTube. So once again, thank you, Cathy, so much. On Iowa, and go Hawkeyes.